Looks like it's back to our cozy fire today, with plenty of great stories from me, Dr. Plague. Thanks for joining us for today's cozy horror. Let's start things off with a bang, with a classic of mine that I hope is a favorite of yours. The kiddos have to get out and stretch their legs every now and again. Everybody knows that. But it's always important to know the perils of where they're playing, so that yours doesn't fall into the same trap that the subject of today's son falls into. So, let's read the writing on the wall and find out about the message, "I miss you, Daddy." I can't explain it, but he's been here the whole time. No one believed me. My wife thought I was insane, but he's been here the whole time. My son, Dale, was 5 when he went missing. We were at the park by our flat when it happened. Park may be too grand a word for it, but that's what Dale always called it. In reality, it was a big plastic play structure with a couple of slides, a climbing wall, and a sand pit. The whole thing is surrounded by a 15 by 15 fence with a couple of benches for parents to sit on inside. That's where I sat that day, scrolling through Reddit and finishing my cigarette. Dale was playing with a couple of neighborhood kids, their parents sitting on the other benches, so they didn't have to breathe in my smoke. I looked up in time to see him go beneath the play structure, into an area they call the cave. The cave is an enclosed area beneath the structure, with a roof that was comfortably close for a kid and downright claustrophobic for an adult. I heard my phone chirp and looked back down to see a text from my wife. She'd gotten home from work and wanted Dale and me to come help with the groceries. I pitched my cigarette over the fence and called for Dale. "Come on, Dale. Mom's waiting for us." No response. "Come on, Dale. If you can't listen, we won't be able to come back tomorrow." Usually this would have brought him running. Playing outside was his favorite pastime, but there was still no answer. Both of his playmates came out the other side, giggling and laughing as they acted out whatever game they were playing, and I asked if they'd seen Dale. Alicia, a dark-haired girl who was missing her front teeth, lisped, "He's still in the cave, Mr. Darwith." So, I hunkered my nearly 6-foot frame, looked into the dark underbelly of the play structure, and called for Dale to come out. "Come on, Dale, we really have to go. Mom's waiting on us." I still didn't think anything was amiss, other than Dale trying to squeeze in a few more minutes of playtime. I expected him to giggle and poke his head out, baiting me into chasing him or crawling into the cave. He knew that as big as I was, it would be funny to watch me try to get under the structure and run him out, a game we played often. Instead, there was only silence. So I sighed and hunkered down on the damp sand to crawl under to get him. I heard the other two parents chuckle as they watched me, my back scraping at the bottom of the structure as I crawled towards the entrance to the cave. I didn't mind playing with Dale, but this was a little much. I was tired from my night shift the day before, and my back was sore from lifting freight all night. I resigned myself to having a stern talking to with him on the way home about not listening and crawled into the dark opening of the cave. As I passed from the lighted world outside, the afternoon sun cut slants across my face through the boards of the structure as I entered the darkness of the cave. I felt a crawling sensation on my neck suddenly. Thought I might have picked up a spider, and I ran a hand over to knock him off. There was nothing there, but the feeling wouldn't abate. It felt like my hackles were up, that ancient feeling of predators nearby putting me on edge, and it took everything I had to keep dragging myself through the space. It was only about 5 feet of blackness, but the space was preternaturally dark. It was the weirdest I had felt in years. Was it always this dark in here? I'd crawled through here before, but I didn't remember it being this black. Worse still, I didn't feel like I was alone in here. Of course I'm not alone, I reminded myself. I came in here to get Dale. As I crawled through, I began to doubt that he was still in here, and the sense that something else lived here wouldn't so easily be put aside. I felt like something hateful lived here, something that was even now hungry and slobbering. My goal went from getting Dale to getting the hell out of the space, and I came out the other side expecting to be dragged back and consumed any minute. I stood up, wiping the dirt off my knees, as the air puffed out of me loudly. It could have easily been mistaken for exertion, but I'd be a fool to pretend it was anything but fear. I expected my son to pop out and laugh at his silly old dad then, but he was still nowhere to be found. "Dale," I called, my voice becoming fearful after what I'd experienced. "Dale!" The other parents looked up, hearing the jagged quality of my voice, and rose to see if everything was okay. I can't find my son," I told them, and they told me not to panic as we searched the structure. My wife came walking up just as I started getting frantic, and she must have sensed my concern as she caught sight of me. She called the police then, and as I ran to check the woods, I heard her say that hateful phrase for the first time. "Our son's gone missing. Please send help." Half an hour later, 2 cars pulled up and a couple of officers came to render assistance. I had searched behind the flats, in the scraggy woods nearby, around the little retention pond that I always told Dale to keep away from, and was just about to start knocking on doors when I saw them. They wanted to talk to me being the last to see Dale, and the officer in charge sent 2 of his men to check nearby houses as they asked me questions for the next few minutes. Where had I seen him? What was he wearing? Was there anyone suspicious around? Who were his mates? Where might he have gone off to? Did he run away often? And all the time they assured me that they would find him, and not to panic. I answered their questions honestly, but I knew that he couldn't have left the play park. Dale was small for his age. I told them so, and despite all my misgivings with the flat we lived in, they had done one thing that I thanked them for. The clasp on the gate was too heavy for a little tyke to push up. Dale had struggled with it before, but I knew he couldn't have left without help. The other parents said they hadn't seen him come out or seen anyone lurking around the playground that day. So the police searched. They searched the play park, the surrounding flats, the woods, and the whole area, basically retreading the ground I had already walked. As night began to fall, they called in more officers and began to canvass the wider area. My wife and I were distraught. Dale was our first and only child, but as the day stretched on, it seemed less and less likely that they would find him. I'm not ashamed to say that I took Dale's disappearance poorly. My wife was stoic through it all, but I knew she was hurting. He was her baby, and she had carried him for 9 months, but I think she held a lot of her sorrow in because she saw me floundering. I became like a ghost in my own home. Eventually I went back to work, but my performance suffered. It only takes a little effort to load things onto a truck, but I was falling behind, missing quotas, and making trucks late. The supervisor was a mate from primary school, fortunately for me, and he saw that I wasn't doing well. He suggested counseling and told me it might help, but I didn't want to tell some stranger about my problems. A year passed, my wife and I growing distant as the days went by, and as the anniversary of Dale's disappearance drew closer, I finally really screwed things up at work. I can't even say that it wasn't my fault, because it absolutely was. I was operating a lift, something I'd done since I got certified at 19, and as I backed out with a load, I hit a riser. It wasn't a hard hit, just a bump really, but the legs on that particular riser, as it turned out, were getting ready to give way. The riser collapsed in spectacular fashion, and when it fell on one of my co-workers. He lived. They managed to get the pallets off of him before they crushed him, but it broke his collarbone, and he had to be hospitalized. My supervisor was furious, but I could tell he was trying to hold back in the face of my sincere grief. "I'm recommending you take a couple of weeks unpaid leave. If it were anyone else, I'd hand them their walking papers here and now, but I know you need help more than you need a trip to the unemployment line. Take these 2 weeks, sort your life out, and return to work. If this happens again, mate, I ain't gonna have a choice." I couldn't look at him. His pity was worse than his anger, and I knew I needed to do something. I nodded, mumbling a thank you, and he showed me out of his office. I walked around for the rest of the night, trying to figure out what I was going to tell my wife, and finding nothing. She would be mad, probably mad enough to push her to leave me. But as the sun started to peek over the horizon, I knew there wasn't much else I could do. She was just as mad as I'd thought she'd be, but her pity was just as hard to look at as my supervisor's had been. He's gone. Dale is gone, and making yourself a martyr over it won't change the fact. You still have insurance. Get some counseling. Figure this out. I need you back. Not just back at work, but back here. I miss him too, but digging into these wounds won't make it any better. Get some help, for both our sakes. There was something unsaid beneath that statement, and I understood it, but wasn't sure what to do about it. I spent the next 4 days in a blackout state. I had found my therapy at the bottom of a bottle, something I had avoided up to that point. With no job to go to, I just stayed at home and drank my pain away. My wife's patience finally ran out. After 2 days of watching me hunker on the couch like a sot, she told me she was going to see her mother for a few days, and suggested I sort myself out while she was gone. If I come home and you're still like this, I can't promise I'll be back for long. Once she was gone, I spent most of my day in a fermented haze. That's how, on the 5th day, I found myself buzzed and sitting on the same bench I had been on when I told Dale we needed to leave. It was early afternoon, and the play park was empty, thank God. It wasn't the first time I had just come to sit here, and the other parents often found excuses to leave with their kids when I came to wallow in my grief. I was the sad father who came back to the place he'd suffered most, and I really hoped the park had been empty when I got here. Even in my current state, I didn't want anyone to see me like this. It was embarrassing, and it might frighten some of the children if I came weaving into the park smelling like a distillery. I was staring at the play structure, thinking to myself that it might be time to get some help after all. When I first saw it, it was just 8 words, but those 8 words sobered me up faster than any cold shower ever could. On the side of the slide, in rough marker, someone had written, "Where have you gone, Daddy? I miss you." I just sat there, staring for what felt like an eternity, and as the tears came, the alcohol came up as well. My tears fell nakedly into the pile of sick that sat between my legs, and as the rage bubbled up in me, it felt like they were almost burned away. Someone was mocking me, mocking my son's loss, and as I staggered towards the super's office, I was madder than I had any right to be. Mr. Vidner, the super for the complex, always reminded me of one of the hobbits from The Lord of the Rings. He was short, fat, had a curly brown ring of hair around the bald spot on his crown that got bigger every year, and when he sat at his desk, it was like a child sitting in his father's chair. He nearly fell out of that chair when I slammed his office door, his expression of confused anger becoming one of confused fear as he looked on my face. He was a small man, and the sight of a large, angry drunk in his office reminded him of his stature rather quickly. "Someone has written hateful graffiti on your play park, and I want to know what you intend to do about it." He took a minute or two to collect his thoughts before asking what the hell I was talking about. I took him out to have a look, leading him to the slide in question, and he looked taken aback as he read the words. "Who would do such a thing?" he asked, more to himself than anyone. The way he side-eyed me, I could tell he thought I might have done it myself, but one look at my face made him rethink it before he said it. "I'll take care of it immediately, Mr. Dawes. In the meantime, why don't you go get some rest? You look under the weather." He had the decency not to call me a drunk out in the open, and I conceded the matter as I went home to sober up a little. As night began to fall, some undetermined amount of time later, I sat up from the couch and listened to the 5 or 6 stout cans rattle angrily to the floor. By the headache and the mealy taste in my mouth, I had not gone home and sobered up. As I moved into the kitchen to make something for dinner, I remembered the words on the slide and felt angry all over again. As the meat pie I had taken out of the freezer spun in the microwave, I wondered if Vidner had taken care of it like he said he would. I wondered if he'd painted over it or washed it away or how he had done it. Were the words still sitting there on that slide? As the microwave dinged, I resolved to go find out, and took my pie and plastic fork on a little field trip. I watched the steam roll off the top as I walked down to the little park, the night air alive with crickets and night birds. It would have been pretty if I hadn't been in such despair. The trees were losing their autumn leaves, becoming bare and skeletal, and the air was crisp enough to make my undershirt unadvisable. My bare feet slapped at the concrete as I walked away from my flat, and the closer I got, the better the view of the offending slide. The words were gone, the pressure washer having left the slide a little lighter for its effort, but as I came through the gate, I saw that something else had been added to the side of the structure. It looked like the same marker strokes, the handwriting big and childish, and as I read it, I felt a growl rumble in my throat. I saw you today, Daddy. I saw you, but you didn't see me. I looked around as the wind rattled the nearby tree, expecting to see a group of snickering youths as they watched me. This had teenagers written all over it, and as the pie slipped out of my hand, I loosed my shout at the sky. Why? Why did they devil me like this? Was this a game to them? When I was a kid, we would never have done something like this to anyone, let alone a grieving father. The dark offered up no answers, but the side of the play park did when I turned back. Beneath the first message, another smaller message was written in the same childish scrawl. The longer I looked at it, the more I recognized it. How many times had I watched my son scribble words in his reader just that way, filling in the workbook pages in big, looping script as he prepared to go to kindergarten. Daddy, I can see you, but you can't see me. Please help me. It's scary here. I hunkered on my knees in the sand, looking at the words as I ran my fingers over them. They looked just like his, and as I felt a splinter catch in the pad of my thumb, I pulled it back sharply. There was no way he could be here. There was no way that he could have been hiding here for a year. But as I watched the playset, I had no doubt that he had written those words. Dale, I said, my voice quavery as I glanced into the shadowy depths of the playground. Dale, I shouted a little louder, casting around as I tried to find him. I walked around to the other side, stumbling in the gritty sand as it sucked at my feet. My head was full of rails, and my words slurred even to my own ears. There were doubtlessly people looking down through their curtains at me as I capered like a sot drunk, but I didn't care. My boy was here. He was here somewhere, and I needed to find him. I tripped then, going face down in the sand, and when I came up, I saw a new message on the wet-looking plasterwood. It was hard to see in the shadows that I sat in, but as I got closer, I put my trembling fingers on it to make sure it was real. My fingers came away tacky, the tips black as if they had touched wet marker. I need you to come get me, Daddy. I'm stuck in the sad swamps, and I need help. Excuse me, sir. Everything all right here? As their flashlights hit me, I squinted, but the words were like a brand across my eyes. The sad swamps was what Dale called the swamps of sorrow from his favorite movie, The Never-Ending Story. We had watched it about 1,000 times, and when the VHS that I had owned as a kid finally broke in the VCR, we had searched for it on DVD until we found it at a local thrift store. He watched it every day before his afternoon nap, and I imagined that he could just about quote it word for word. Seeing the words sad swamps made me certain that it was Dale talking. But how? How could he be talking to me from... The light was right in my face now, and I pulled up a hand to block it. Some of your neighbors were worried. You were faring poorly, Mr. Dawes. They heard you shouting and wanted us to come check on you. They were being kind. It seemed that everyone was being kind these days to poor old drunk Mr. Dawes. But I didn't have time for them. I'd seen something under the edge of the play park, half a word that was buried in the shadows. It was his latest message, and as I staggered towards it a little, I hoped it would tell me how to get to him. "What happened?" one of them asked in his jovial tone as he leaned down. "Why flock you out after you came home snookered?" "Well, we can get you a place to sleep it off, sir. Never—" He had put a hand on my shoulder, but I pulled away from him as I tried to see the words that were written beneath the structure. It was just 6 words, but I couldn't see the last one, and the last one seemed very important. The police grabbed a hold of me, but I fought to get away as I tried to see that last word. I got as close as I could, both catching me under an arm as they pulled me away from the structure, and finally I saw it. I repeated it again and again as they put me in the back of the car, all the fight out of me now, wanting to commit it to memory before my drink-addled brain made a muck of it. "We'll phone the missus and let her know that she can pick you up in the tank, Mr. Dawes. If she don't wanna, then I guess you're sobering up on a bench for the night, so long as you don't try any more of that." I ignored them as we left the parking lot, my flat disappearing behind us as I repeated those 6 words like a mantra. Look for me inside the cave. The police hadn't been wrong. My wife was livid. She came down to the station, her clothes clearly thrown on hastily, and glowered at me through the bars of the holding cell. It was just me in there with a few old gaffers, and they were snoring in a corner as I slouched on the bench. I was still imprinting those words on my brain, mumbling them like a magic spell, when I heard her voice and looked up into her scowling face. "I can't believe you've done this. It isn't enough that you get sent home from work, that you do nothing but blunder around like an old tramp, and that you won't get any help for yourself. But now you go and get yourself tossed in the drunk tank. I'm done, Malcolm. Do you understand me? This is the last straw. I won't stay here and watch you destroy yourself." "He's alive," I rasped out, and when she looked back at me, I saw all the anger leak out of her, only to be replaced with pity. "I miss him too, just as much as you do, but you have to let him go. It's been a year, Malcolm. He's not coming home. It wasn't your fault what happened to him. You have to stop blaming yourself for this. He's been leaving me messages at the play park, Stephanie. I can prove it. Come with me and I'll show you. We can find him. We can be a family again. We can—" But she cut me off with the first sob I'd heard from her in months. "I'm leaving, Malcolm. When they release you in the morning, don't call me. Go back to the flat. Go to your mother's house. Go to hell for all I care. I can't watch you do this anymore." She left me there with the other drunks, but I'd already decided what I had to do. They turned me loose in the morning, and after a brisk walk home, I got the things I'd need. I brought a torch, some string, and a big hunting knife I'd had since I was a teenager, and set off for the play park. It was early morning, and I had the place to myself, save for the pigeons still gobbling at my spilled pie remains. I didn't see any new graffiti, but I didn't need any. I knew where Dale was, and as I got on my hands and knees, I crawled around the playground and into the cave. Even in my assuredness, I felt foolish as I moved into the cave. It was dark, but I could still see the light streaming in from the other side. I didn't feel that same sense of foreboding like I had before. No sense of monsters coming to gobble me up, and I turned on the torch as I checked out the corners. The cave was a box of 4 walls with a roof of thick plastic overhead, and I should have been able to see all 4 walls. 3 of the walls were normal enough, but as I looked to the west-facing wall, I was aware of another opening that led into a space that shouldn't exist. An opening between that led into deeper darkness. As my torch turned against the encroaching blackness, I turned my body in a ponderous circle and started crawling into it. If I meant to get my son back, I would need to hobble into the sad swamp and come out the other side. In contrast to the dark cave behind me, the space I entered was pitch black. The edges of my light curled oddly, the darkness seeming to retreat around the edges like felt as I moved in deeper. I wasn't underground. I was still heading forward, but given the dimensions of the play structure, the place I crawled shouldn't exist. The length was wrong. The longer I crawled, the more I expected to wake up and find that I had fallen asleep in the drunk tank. The space was cramped, but felt vast as it stretched on. It was like an abandoned underground cave, the claustrophobic passage threatening to collapse on me at any minute. Besides being black dark, it was also utterly silent. Besides the crunch of my knees as they moved over the sand, no other sounds seemed to exist. My own labored breathing seemed to be absorbed by that thick midnight around me, and every painful drag of my body sent a spasm of need through me. It was a primal need, a need to stand at my full height and stretch my arms up, a way to dissipate the confining gloom that hung around me. The same part of my brain made it pretty clear, however, how bad an idea that would be. What if my hands should pass into that darkness and never return? What if the darkness came back with the hand? I kept crawling into that inky soup, wondering if I would simply wander here forever. It was pitch outside the protective beam of my torch, and with every struggling shuffle, I wondered why I didn't turn around and go back. Nothing could survive down here. Nothing could live in this pitch blackness. If I didn't go back now, I'd never find my way out, and be forced to wander endlessly in this void until my torch went out. And then what? I knew I wasn't alone when I heard the soft scuff of feet on sand. I looked into the black expanse, expecting to see the beast that had terrified me the last time I found myself in this nothing. The beam of my torch didn't go very far. At the end of the light, I could hear the scuff of bare feet on sand, though. Something was coming towards me, and I wasn't sure what I was hoping to find. Would it be my son, or would it be a monster to end my journey? When a dirty, half-starved little boy buried me in a hug that circled my shoulders, I knew I'd found him. "Dale?" I whispered, but he could only nod and cry against me. I didn't waste time or breath. I just scooped him up and didn't stop moving until I was back in the lighted world of the play park. As we moved, I could feel that clawing, penetrating glare from behind me. Something had noticed I was taking its prize, and they were unhappy. I kept crawling, kept pulling, but I could hear those scrabbling feet as they kicked up sand. They were getting closer now, their growl loud and thunderous, and on a whim, I turned my torch on them. Bathed in the light, they yelped wildly and kicked up sand as they backpedaled. I didn't dare look back to see what was tailing me. I put on a burst of speed, crawling like our lives depended on it, and when I collapsed in the light of day, I was aware of people shouting at me to get out of there. Their kids were asking who I was and why I was so dirty, but they must have thought I was a bum. When they saw Dale, they tried to take him from me, but I held on like my life depended on it. And when they finally recognized us, I heard their anger turn to surprise. They took us both to the hospital, and I'm glad to say that aside from being underfed and very dirty, Dale was completely fine. My wife came to the hospital, and we both cried as she apologized for doubting me. I refused it, telling her she had nothing to apologize for. I doubted myself. I fell into the bottle and nearly lost myself in my grief. I should be apologizing to you for putting you through this for the last year. She sat with me at the hospital, both of us afraid to take our eyes off Dale as he sat placidly in his hospital bed. I asked him about what he had gone through, but he couldn't tell me much. He said that he got lost in the cave, and he crawled and crawled until he came out in the play park again. Only it wasn't his play park. The play park he found was different, and me and his friends were gone. The sky was sort of purple, and the clouds were too thick-looking to be real. I couldn't get the gate open, but that was probably good. There were these big things that would come by like living shadows, and they would look at me like I was an animal in the zoo. I drank some water from a gross puddle, but there was no food. Sometimes I went to sleep in the cave, but I always felt like something was watching me in there. It never tried to hurt me, but it always felt like I was hiding and waiting for someone to catch me. I thought I was going to starve before I heard you breathing in the cave. I had to run away to get away from some shadow people who were looking for me, and I heard you down there and went to see what the sound was. I asked him about the messages, and he said he had found some kind of marker in the sand over there, and that was about the time he started seeing a shadow inside the play park. I knew it was you. Somehow I just knew it was you, but you couldn't see me. So I started writing messages, hoping you would see them. I guess you found them. The strangest part is that Dale swears he was only there for a week. He says he kept going back into the cave, but he only slept a few times while he was away. What's more, the doctors say he doesn't appear to have grown in the time he was gone. His dental records and growth structure are the same as when he had a checkup about a month before he disappeared. I'm glad to have Dale back, but I don't let him play in the cave anymore. We still visit the play park, and I still let him slide on the slides and run on the structure like he used to, but he's forbidden to go underneath anymore. It's a rule he doesn't mind following, lest he get lost in those dark tunnels for a second time. Chilling, isn't it? But it's a good thing that we've got this warm fire here to keep the cold out. We all like to camp, at least I do, but when you're out in the woods, it's important to be a good guest of nature. You don't want to run afoul of the Dark Watchers. I've been sitting on this for a little while, but I think it's time. This happened about 3 years ago. I was, without a doubt, the worst kind of hiker. You know those guys who are all leave no sign, bagging their garbage, burying their poop, cleaning up their campsite, respecting nature's natural beauty and all that? Yeah, that wasn't me. I liked camping. My parents liked camping. But there was always a mentality of the woods will take care of things. I watched my dad leave a whole cooler full of empty beer cans at the site one time when I was 8. We brought a couch with us on a camping trip one time, just because Dad knew of a ravine nearby. Broken fishing rods, left those by the creek. Garbage, right on the ground. Hell, we left a whole tent once because Dad couldn't get it back in the bag. We didn't use campgrounds either. Mom and Dad would pack up and find somewhere in the middle of nowhere and just live off the land for a couple of days, then leave their crap behind. I can't say that this is why I am the way I am. I know better than to litter and be a pig, but in my head, the woods will always take care of themselves. It's been here for millions of years. Why is my trash and stuff gonna mess with it? If my styrofoam cooler kills a couple of trees, then they didn't deserve to be there, right? That's what I thought, at least. I go camping about 3 times a year. The start of spring, the start of summer, and the end of summer. I live in California, so I always just pack up my pickup, get some food and beer and recreational greenery, and head out to somewhere remote. A buddy of mine from work hadn't shut up about this overlook an hour from the city, right outside the Santa Lucia mountain range, and I figured I'd go crash out there for a weekend. Unlike my parents, I'm not a living off the land kind of person. I brought food, I brought stuff, and I intended to do nothing but sit in the wilderness, sleep in my hammock, and get buzzed. I called out Friday and found the perfect spot by lunchtime. It was gorgeous, overlooking the valley and so remote that If I were to get really hurt, I'd probably die out here with no one the wiser. I set up my hammock, set out my fire logs with some water, just in case, and just kind of spread out a bit. I made some lunch, sandwiches, rolled a joint, and just kind of got mellow for a bit as the day rolled on. It was nice out here, just watching the clouds and listening to nature. I was soon pretty well lit, and the sun started creeping down as I set to lighting my fire. There was probably a burn ban in effect, but I had water, and I didn't care. Out here, no one was going to see me anyway, and I started roasting hot dogs as the sun cut a fantastic line across the sky. That was the first time I noticed them. I remember looking up and whispering, "Shit," as I mistook them for rangers or cops or something. They were just silhouettes on the ridge, not far from my camp, 3 or 4 of them, and they had these wide, flat-topped hats, like park rangers or the guy on the oatmeal box. I watched them for a minute, thinking I was busted, but they just stood there. They didn't move, they didn't call out, but I know they saw me. My fire had to be visible for a ways at this height, and the longer they stayed there, the more creeped out I felt. Why were they just standing there? If they wanted me to leave, then why not tell me to leave? I didn't know, but once the sun set, I noticed they had vanished and just kept an eye peeled. I had my gun, a big old .45, so I wasn't worried, but I suddenly wished I had a tent to sleep in instead of just a hammock. I sparked up again after eating a pack of dogs, though, and that took some of the edge off. Took any thought of the shadow guys out of my mind whatsoever. I dozed off in my hammock, but I dreamed about them that night, too. I dreamed that they were in my campsite, just standing around and watching me. They were like the outlines of people, like when someone stands in front of the sun, and all you get is a burnt-out image of them. They didn't have any features, no eyes or anything, and I was frozen there as they looked at me. They didn't say anything, they just watched me, and it felt like being sleep paralyzed the whole time. I woke up after dawn, almost fell out of my hammock, and started making breakfast as I stirred up the ashes of last night's fire. I wondered if it had really been a dream or not, but I felt like it must have been. Why would they come out here not to say anything? All my stuff was there too, down to the hot dog wrappers I'd left on the ground next to the fire. I tossed it in absent-mindedly and ate eggs and ham. The ice was still holding out. It was spring and not too hot yet, so I decided to go for a forest pub crawl today. Translation, I put a bunch of beer into my backpack and walked out into the woods so I could have a drunk hike. I spent about 5 hours hiking in the woods, tossing my dead soldiers into the trees as I finished them. Some of them broke, most of them didn't, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following me. I hiked in the woods. I never saw anything. Wasn't like I spotted someone hiding behind a tree, but it was like deep pockets of shadows that shouldn't have been there. It was midday, the sun was high, and I should have had major visibility. Even so, I found myself looking around as the crawling feeling just got worse and worse. Some of it was being drunk in the hot woods with no water, and when I found a stream, I plunged my face into it to get some clarity. I drank a little. Dad always said running water was fine to drink from, and when something snapped not far behind me, I looked up like a zebra at a watering hole. I looked around, trying to find what was stalking me, but there was nothing, just the quiet forest and the gently rushing stream. No, I didn't believe that. I'd felt like I was stalked all day, and as I watched the trees, I felt sure that something moved out there. I got up and started running, the zebra analogy too hard to break, and I kept waiting for the claws to sink into me, the teeth to bite, the hot breath to fall on my neck. It was going to come at any minute. I could feel it, and when I tripped over a fallen log, I just lay there and waited for the end. It would get me now. It would get me, and I'd be dead. I'd be dead. Nothing happened. I lay there for about 10 minutes just knowing that it would get me when I moved, but it never came. When the ants started to bite my legs, I sat up and swiped at them. I'd fallen next to an ant hill, and I had accidentally stomped on it in my haste, and they were mad as hell about it. I ended up going back to the creek to wash them off, a haphazard trip that took me another 10 minutes, and I was still looking around like a scared animal. I sat with my legs in the creek until they had stopped throbbing, and then made my miserable way back to camp. It was not as much fun walking back as it had been walking out, and I was jittery and tense the whole way. The sun was starting to slip down, and I absolutely didn't want to be out here when it got dark. Too many things could be crunching around out here in the dark. I made it back to camp before it got dark, and as I cooked my dinner, the sun started to ride low again. It was more hot dogs tonight, cooked over the fire, but I couldn't finish all of them. I was too scared to look away from the ridge, and I ended up burning more than one of them. They tasted fine either way, but I had eyes only for the shadows on the ridge. They had the same wide-brimmed hats. A few of them had canes, but none of them were really people. They were like shadows, the images burned at Hiroshima, the photo negatives that sometimes get burned into old photographs. All of them at once, and none of them at all. They just stood there, watching me. They didn't move. They didn't stir. And as the sun sank, I became colder and colder. I should have gone to my truck and left, but I didn't. I made myself put it out of my mind. I convinced myself that I was just being foolish. When it got dark, I got in my hammock and tried to get comfortable, but it wouldn't come. My leg hurt. I was sunburnt. I was hungover. I was dehydrated. I was, but ultimately, I was afraid. I was afraid that when I closed my eyes, they would get me. I was afraid they would just carry me off into the night and I'd never be seen again. They would find my truck and my campsite, but never me. Maybe, I thought as I finally nodded off, someone would look up one afternoon at sunset and see me on that ridge too, just watching. I must have fallen asleep, and I like to think I dreamed what came next. I want to, but I can't convince myself that I did. I woke up and saw them standing around me. I could see them, and not just the ones in front of the fire. They were darker than the night itself somehow, and they began to creep closer to me. Crept is the wrong word, though. They slid along the ground like ghosts in some of the horror movies I'd watched as a kid. They hemmed me in, my body shaking, but my voice stuck in my throat. I didn't dare move. I didn't dare speak. And as they knelt around me, I heard whispering. It was a terrible sound, and it follows me into sleep sometimes. You come here to the womb of creation and leave your waste. You are a brainless creature, fit only to destroy things made by your betters. You burn the wood of a creature who has existed before you were more than a twinkling in your father's eye. You destroy a place that was new when this planet cooled. You throw your trash into a home shared by 100 billion organisms, and you claim to be superior here. The better. You are nothing. You will die and be forgotten. On and on and on. They whispered endlessly to me, telling me how worthless I was, how I was a nuisance and a nothing, and how I would never change. Then, one of them rose up above my hammock, his body seeming to hang over me, like a shadow cast from above. He looked like them, but he was clearly their boss or something, and when he brought the cane down on nothing but air, I heard it crack like a thunderbolt. Go back to your stinking pit, but be warned. The next time you come to our woods and ruin our place, you will not be allowed to scamper off so easily. You are a stunted thing who was taught badly, but ignorance is forgivable. If you persist in this folly, we will not be so kind again. Now go, it yelled, and I opened my eyes to find that it was morning. I was laying in my hammock, piss dribbling down my leg, and I knew that I better not be here when the sun came up. I cleaned up everything. I picked up all my garbage. I cleaned up my site. I poured water over the fire and mixed it with dirt like they had always said to on TV. Then I took everything with me, and I ran for the truck. That was Sunday, and I've been kind of afraid to leave my apartment. What if they're waiting out there for me? What if they find me slipping, or they don't like that I don't recycle or something like that? What if I offend them and they drag me back to the woods to be punished? That's part of why I'm writing this. If you're like me, someone who doesn't care about their mess or just leaves the woods wrecked, then watch out. Don't let the Dark Watchers catch you messing up their forest, because they do more than just watch. Don't let them see you slipping, or you might find out what sort of punishment awaits those who anger them. Logs are just getting good and going, so if you're just joining us, it's at a great time. Haircuts are kind of a necessary evil. If they don't cost an arm and a leg, there's always some kind of strings attached. So let's find out why the barber cuts his hair for free. Mr. Faskel has cut my hair since I moved to the city about 3 years ago. He's an older guy, maybe 50s or 60s, and he possesses that look and drawl that make me think he's from up north somewhere. He could be from New York, Maine, or even the Great Lakes area, but I never asked him where. He's not a big guy, maybe $1.20 in the rain, and he cuts my hair just the way I like it. High and tight on the sides, leave me some on top, so whoever I'm sleeping with has something to play with, and neaten up my sideburns. I can't grow a real beard, or he'd probably trim that for me too. The best part is, he does it all for free. Hard to believe, I know, but it seems there was a cost after all. Our relationship started easily enough. I had an interview with the city, maintenance and custodial, and I wanted to look sharp for the interview. Everything other than that paid nothing, or barely nothing, and I really wanted to lock this job down. I had a nice set of interview clothes, some comfortable business shoes, and a winning smile. Now all I needed was a sharp haircut to seal the deal. That's where the problem lies. My hair grows abnormally fast. It always has, and when I was a kid, my dad used to bemoan the fact. He made jokes about going to barber school or buying stock in master cuts, but he always understood that when it was time for a cut, it was time for a cut. If you let it go longer than 2 weeks without a cut, it just turned into a shapeless mass. By the end of week 3, I looked like a sheepdog, and Dad would look over his paper and sigh before saying that it was time to take me to the barber. Faskel's Hair and Beards was about a block from my house, and when I stuck my head in to get their prices, Mr. Faskel looked up and smiled at me over a pile of hair he was sweeping up. Then, suddenly, he took a deep breath, and when he opened his eyes again, I asked if everything was okay. "Just fine, young man. Say, you look like a man in need of a haircut. Am I right?" I told him he sure was, and he invited me in and told me to have a seat. He had about 1,000,000 questions on my first visit. No, I didn't usually let it get this long. I liked it this way, but a little long on the top. No, I didn't use any special shampoo, just the dandruff shampoo from the Dollar General. No, I wasn't really prone to dry scalp, but a fella can never be too careful. On and on and on and on until finally it was done. He had cut it just right, the perfect length, the perfect fade, everything. I asked him what I owed him, and he told me it was free. "Come on," I said, "you gotta charge me something." "I let my customers decide what they can afford, so whatever you can afford is fine with me. Think of it as a tip." I was okay with that, and I walked out with a free haircut, while Mr. Faskel waved me out with a $10 tip. I left with a spring in my step. I felt like a new man, and I was ready for that job interview. I went home, got a shower, and when I looked in the mirror, I knew I had this. The next time I went to see Mr. Faskel, I left him a $20 tip and told him that it was all thanks to him that I'd gotten my awesome new job. For the next couple of years, I always went to Mr. Faskel's when I needed a cut. If I had a date coming up, I went to see Mr. Faskel. Promotion interview at work? Faskel. I told my friends about the shop. I went there just to get touch-ups and talk with the old fella. In no time at all, Mr. Faskel and I were friends. He liked the same sporting team I did, watched a lot of the same movies and TV shows I did, and even liked a lot of the same classic rock that I did. It was great, and I always looked forward to my bi-monthly haircut. Then, about 2 months ago, it all changed. I had come in to get my bi-monthly haircut, telling Mr. Faskel about the previous week as he cut and styled my hair. He was always meticulous, getting everything just right as he cut and trimmed, and when he turned me around to look in the mirror, it was the same way I'd gotten it for the last 3 years. I thanked him, handed him a 20, and told him I'd see him next time. "Of course," Mr. Faskel said, sweeping up the hair. "Come back any time." I was leaving, almost a block up the street, when I realized I didn't have my sunglasses. They were my brand new Oakleys, too, and they'd cost quite a bit of cash. I remembered having them when I came in, taking them off my head, and setting them down at the station that Mr. Faskel used. No problem, I thought. I'll just go back and get them. I stepped in, saying I'd forgotten my sunglasses and was just going to grab them. That's when I saw them. Mr. Faskel was looking up guiltily, his eyes panicked. He was down on all fours, eating the hair he had swept up off the ground, like he was a cow in the field. When he turned, I could see pieces of hair sticking to his lip like accusations. He stood up, wiping himself off and brushing at his mouth as he tried to explain. "Now, I know what this looks like, and I'll admit that, yes, I was eating your hair, but you have to understand your hair is what I look forward to. I don't eat just anyone's hair. Well, I used to. Now I can't wait to see you come in so I can eat something good. Why are you looking at me like that? I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy," he shouted, getting up as he stalked towards me. He seemed to realize that saying that made him sound crazy, so he switched gears. Haven't I always done good work for you? There's nowhere in this town where you could get a haircut for less than $25. I cut your hair for tips. I've cut your hair for the dollars in your pocket. I've been good to you, and you've been a good customer. Let's just pretend this never happened, okay? Let's just go back to... But I didn't hear the rest. I snatched up my sunglasses and was out the door before he could say another word. I spent a while thinking about that, and the more I processed it, the worse it seemed to get. It began to haunt my dreams, seeing him bent over, eating the hair straight off the floor, looking back at me and grinning with my hair in his teeth. And I'd wake up in a cold sweat. I know it's not a particularly scary dream, but it freaked me the hell out. I don't really like it when people put hair in their mouth. I had a girl in elementary school who used to chew on her pigtails, and it bred in me a lifetime phobia. Just the thought of wet hair in someone's mouth makes me want to puke, and I can't even touch someone's hair without cringing if they have a wig on. I know, it's a weird collection of phobias, but they're mine. It only took a couple of weeks before I started seeing new growth. My hair just grows too fast, and after 3 weeks, my boss commented that I was looking shabby. He handed me a 20 out of his own wallet and told me to go get a trim over lunch. I took it and started looking for somewhere to get a trim. The city had quite a few shops, but it seemed like wherever I went, I caught someone looking at me out of the corner of my eye. It was never anything I could prove, just a feeling, and when I looked up, I could almost swear I'd catch a glimpse of Mr. Faskel. He was gone when I looked up, but it made me extremely paranoid. I became aware of more than a glimpse as the weeks went on. When I rode the bus to work, I caught the familiar deep inhale of someone smelling my hair. When I was standing in a lunch line, I felt my hair move as someone inhaled. When I was at Walmart buying groceries, someone actually touched my hair, but they were gone when I turned around. It led me to become something of a recluse, and I only left the house if it was to go to work. Over time, my hair grew out, and I decided that I would have to get another cut. I went to bed, setting my alarm so I could get up early enough to go to Master Cuts down on Bonnie. It was Saturday. I had the day off, and I had chores to do before the business of relaxation. As I slipped off to sleep, I fell into a familiar dream. A dream that had plagued me for weeks. I was sitting in the chair at Mr. Faskel's, the cape falling around me like a spider web, and the old man asking if it was too tight. I didn't say anything. I was too scared to speak. And as the scissors began to clip, I trembled in fear. I didn't dare look back at the old man. I just knew his real face would be replaced by a monstrous visage, and I would wake up panting and looking around for nothing at all. When the alarm went off, I went to the bathroom to splash some water on my face and start the shower. My bare shoulders itched, and when I went to wipe it off, I noticed there was hair clinging to my sweaty hand. Not a lot, just leavings, like the leavings you find after a haircut. I ran to the bathroom and found that my hair was cut just the way I liked it. The sides were high and tight. The top was manageable but still thick, and my bangs were perfect. Everything was just as it usually was, and I felt a cold chill run through me that had nothing to do with the air conditioner. I called my landlord. I had the locks changed and reported to the police that someone had broken into my house and cut my hair. The police didn't really take it seriously. They made jokes about a midnight barber and asked if I'd left a tip under my pillow. I told them about Mr. Faskel, but when I gave them the address, they just shook their heads and walked away. They thought I was joking with them. They didn't believe a word of what I told them. And as I ran the shower, I remember sitting under the water for a very long time, just letting it run over me. The bits of hair flowing down the drain felt like a betrayal. 2 weeks later, I woke up to another fresh haircut. I called the police again, but they rolled their eyes and told me to calm down. I told them it was hard for me to calm down when someone was breaking into my house and cutting my hair. I demanded they go check on Mr. Faskel and told them right where the shop was, but they looked less than amused this time at the suggestion. I asked if they had talked to him yet, told them that he had been my barber for the last 3 years, but they just told me it hadn't been funny the first time, and it wasn't funny now. Why would it be funny? I asked, having to stop myself from grabbing one of them. Because Faskel's has never been opened. It's a prop for the city's revitalization project, like Cooley's Flowers across the street or Green Butcher beside it. It's just set dressing. It's never open. Mr. Faskel was a guy who owned a barbershop in the 1920s. He's dead. There's no Faskel who cuts hair. They left, and that left me pretty rattled. Mr. Faskel isn't a ghost. I know that. I have friends who go to him. I felt him touch me. He's flesh and blood, just like I am. I'm sure of it. The fact that he eats hair is incidental. The man is real, but if he isn't Mr. Faskel, then who is he? How does he keep breaking into my house? I have windows in my room, but they're barred with pieces of broom handle. I live on the 3rd floor, for God's sake. I changed the locks again. I wedged a chair under my door, and when I finally made myself calm down enough to sleep, I hoped it would end. I woke up completely bald this time. Not buzzed, not a zero guard, but bald. Like someone had shaved my head in my sleep and took the hair. They got my eyebrows too, my 5 o'clock shadow, my thick sideburns. I was as smooth and hairless as a newborn baby. I don't know what to do. I can't call the cops. They won't believe me. I can't call my landlord. He's replaced the locks twice now. And he's getting angry about it. I can't afford to move. I can't leave my job. I'm stuck. What I did find, however, was a message on my nightstand. I'm sure the cops will say that I wrote it, but I know I didn't. There's hair on it. It's written in a heavy hand, like a kid scribbles. It's done on the back of an ad for Faskel's Hair and Beards. And the implication was pretty obvious. Come see me when it grows back. If you don't, it makes no difference. I know where to find you. This is definitely hot chocolate weather here. I think I might go make a little while you enjoy this next story. It's important to know who we hurt when we make accusations. If they're truthful accusations, then that's one thing. It's always good to bring people to justice who need to be brought. But sometimes we have to think about the repercussions of our words. The repercussions on this next story are very real. So let's hear about how he didn't touch her. I don't understand how it's come to this. I've been expelled from school. I've lost the few friends I had. My own parents won't even look at me now. And it's all because of her. Her. Even now I can't find it in myself to hate her. I love her, despite what she's done to me. I think I always will. For so many years, she's been my reason to get up in the morning. She's been the last thing I think about before I go to bed. Lisa, my soulmate. I was never what you'd call a popular kid. From kindergarten to high school, I was a fat, shy boy who just wanted to learn. I didn't want to cause trouble, and I certainly didn't want to get in any trouble. I mostly floated through life like a dandelion puff on a breeze. In my kindergarten class, she was this lovely creature with soft blonde hair and a face made for smiles. Even as a child, I knew she was beautiful. She found friends easily. Teachers loved her easy smiles and confident ways. Even the boys, who would still think girls were gross for many years, were forced to recognize her attraction. She was the belle of the ball, and our worlds could not have been more different. I was what you would call a fat child. My weight and desire for friendship made me the constant butt of any joke, and I was always the odd man out of any activity. Lisa sat in front of me. Alphabetically, our names are very close, and she became my secret obsession. I would sit behind her and breathe in the scent of her hair and bask in the glow of her beauty, as she became my respite in this sea of horror. I would often pretend I was in her group of friends, privy to their secrets and a part of their oh-so-enticing world. I would create conversations and lunch dates and feed my imagination with thoughts of our friendship. Our make-believe friendship was more real to me than my own life, and as the years went on, it became more of an obsession than a daydream. I drew pictures of our time together, wrote poems about her beauty, and filled books with our stories. I didn't have friends, not real friends at least. Lisa was all that I had. The trouble began in high school. Lisa was brilliant, always at the top of our class, but I outshone her most of the time when it came to matters academic. Lisa's one stumbling point was mathematics. She had never found math as easy as, say, English or biology, and it became a megrim for her. I would have offered to tutor her, but the gulf between us had only grown wider as we got older. She was a cheerleader and a member of the student council, and the secretary for the glee club. And I was just the fat boy who had grown into an overweight teenager who sat at chess club and debate team and wished I was close to her. When Mr. Sturgis asked us both to stay after class, I never dreamed he would assign me as her tutor. You need help, Lisa, and Reggie is the best math student I have. I think with Reggie's help, you can pass algebra. I could have kissed him. Lisa agreed, though hesitantly, and that afternoon we met in the library to begin her tutoring session. I could barely pay attention to what I was doing, as this goddess sat beside me and asked me, for help on what was really no big deal. I showed her the shortcuts, the workarounds, and the theories that would make it easier for her to succeed. She got a B on her next test, and I couldn't have been prouder. It wasn't long before our study sessions began leaving the library. She met me at the public library a few times, but one day my greatest dream came true. As I left math class, she handed me a folded piece of paper that said to meet her after cheerleading practice. Then she just flipped her hair and smiled as she strode off on Goddess's legs and said, "See you then." The address was to her house. From then on, we always met at her house in the late afternoon. Her parents were surprisingly accepting of a teenage boy in their home, and I rapidly became as fond of them as I was of Lisa. Her father was an architect, and if I arrived before Lisa, he was always taking me into his study to show me his latest blueprints. Her mother was a lawyer, but after a lengthy lawsuit against the firm she had once been with, she had won enough money to stay at home and look after her family. Working from home as a legal consultant meant she often had time to bake, and her home was always full of the smells of bread or pies or culinary delights. The time I spent in Lisa's house was the best time of my life. As algebra became geometry and calculus, she always came back to her study buddy. I found easier ways to teach her what she needed to know, and she turned out to be a quick study once she found someone to speak her language. As we entered our senior year, I never quite asked why she still refused to acknowledge me in the hallway, or why her friends still picked on me. I was just happy to be with her, be around her, be a part of her world. One night, after helping her through a particularly difficult bit of calculus, she whooped with joy and turned to plant a kiss on my surprised lips. She broke the kiss in less than an instant, but it felt to me as though her lips touched mine for years. I could have floated home that night, and as I settled into bed, I knew what I had to do the next day. I would tell her how I felt, how I'd always felt, and ask her to accompany me to the upcoming spring dance. She liked me. We liked being around each other. What could go wrong? I went to her locker the next morning and found her there with only a single friend. Rebecca Jenner, the friend in question, sneered a little as I approached, and when Lisa turned, I somehow failed to notice the furtive look she kept casting around before she half-heartedly smiled at me. It's only in hindsight that I see my mistake. I approached her as an equal. I approached her in the open. I approached her in her element. I surprised her somewhere that she felt safe. I poured out my heart to her, right then and there, and by the end, a crowd had gathered around us. Some of them were snickering. Some of them were right out mocking me. But the mockery wasn't reserved for me alone this time. Looking back, I could already hear the whispered voices of Lisa's peers as they began formulating the gossip. "Oh, Lisa has a thing for pudgy nerds. Looks like Lisa would rather hold hands with pimple-faced dweebs than go out with football players. Sounds like little Lisa had a lot of fun at their study sessions." I didn't care at the time, though. I was pouring my heart out to a girl that I loved, and that was all that mattered. She was crying by the time I was done. Her face was beet red, and her tear-clouded eyes were scanning around for an escape. Finally, she pushed past me, sending me sprawling to the linoleum, and made a break through the crowd. I tried to go after her, but the crowd closed in on me, and the torrent of questions and accusations assaulted me. Where had I been with her? How long before Brad kicked my ass? Was I so stupid to think I was anything but a charity case? On and on and on, until finally I found an outlet and went tearing towards the boys' room. I hid there all through first period, and tried my best to keep my head down for the rest of the day. I didn't see Lisa that day. I didn't see her the next day either. But I heard the rumors about Lisa and her fat little boyfriend, Lisa and her study sessions with me, and all the other rumors about how Brad was looking for me so he could kick my ass up around my ears. Bradley Davies and I didn't have any classes together, luckily for me, but he still managed to find me. He and his friends came across me in the bathroom near the end of the second day and backed me up against the cold wall of the boys' room. He hit me a few times, Brad and Chuck and Gail, and as they took turns hitting me, Brad let me know the score. "You stay away from my girlfriend, you hear me? I didn't mind her keeping a little nerdy pet, so long as she still got to cheer, and I still got to squeeze into her whenever I wanted to." This comment elicited some laughters and slaps on the back from his friends. "But that's over now. She's mine, and I'm not okay with your lost puppy act anymore. I see you around Lisa again, and you're dead, nerd." He punctuated this point by slamming his fist into my cheek,
hard enough to knock my glasses into the sink where the lenses shattered against the porcelain. I lay on the bathroom floor and thought this was as low as I could get. How wrong I had been. When I came to school the next day, something had changed. I had been the target of constant teasing the last 2 days, but the reception I got this morning was icy. People whispered behind their hands, their faces angry, and all the anger seemed to be directed towards me. What had I done to deserve such scorn? I was the victim here, right? Brad had beaten the crap out of me, and Lisa had refused to even talk to me for 3 days. What could I possibly have done? The answer came in homeroom. A police officer was waiting to take me to the office, where Lisa's parents, my parents, and the principal were waiting to talk to me. My confusion turned into fear at this, but confusion would make a lot of reappearances that day. The principal invited me to have a seat. My mother was crying, and my father's eyes bored into me like a power drill. I looked to Lisa's parents for some explanation, but they both made it very clear that they wanted nothing to do with me. Lisa had posted a message on Facebook this morning. She told all her friends about how I had forced myself on her during our study sessions and made her do things that I won't even mention here. My depravity knew no limits, and all the while I had convinced her parents that I was a fine young man and a model student. I had convinced everyone of this, she went on, but in reality I was a pervert and a rapist, and when I'd talk to her at school, talk to her like we were equals, she had finally found the strength to speak out about my depravity. She told her parents after that, and they had called my parents and let them know what their little boy had been up to. Someone had called the police then, and that's how we had come to the point we were at now. I won't bore you with the details. My parents and I became the town black spot for the next 3 months, as I took polygraph tests after psychological evaluation and protested my innocence at every turn. The police claimed they had a rape kit that tested positive for something, but the absence of any physical evidence was confronted by my obvious intellect. Why would he be sloppy enough to leave evidence? One officer asked, looking at me as though I was the lowest form of life. The case against me was eventually thrown out due to lack of evidence, but it hardly mattered. I had been accused of rape, and any bright future I might have had slipped out of my grip. It didn't matter how good my grades were, how high my scores were, or how many testimonials I had written by teachers who believed that I was innocent. No college wanted an accused rapist in their school, and I slumped slowly into depression. Why had she done this? Why had she ruined my life? All I had done was love her. All I had done was tell her how I felt, and all she had done was return my love with ruin. That is what brings us here. I'm standing in her bedroom now, looking over my handiwork. I had heard her parents would be out of town, and Lisa was going to have a party. I wasn't invited, of course. Since the incident, I haven't even been back to school, but I seem to remember where the house was and how breakable the back door window was. The rock made a lot of noise as it smashed through the glass, but no one was there to hear it. For rich, intellectual people, her parents certainly have a lot of faith in humanity. I had never seen a security panel or even a surveillance camera on the property, so getting in undetected was easy. I hid in the big walk-in closet that holds all her lovely clothes and waited for her to come home from school. Her door swung open at 4:15, and imagine my surprise as she and Brad fell into her bed in a writhing pile of teenage spirit. Some would have seen this as an obstacle, but to me, it was just another opportunity. His back was to me, and I came up behind him and cut his throat. He garbled out something, but she didn't even seem to notice until he slipped right off her. She turned around and saw me, and that's when the begging started. The begging and the screaming. She kept shouting Brad's name, begging me not to, and I implored her to be as loud as she wanted. I wanted the neighbors to know what was going on. I wanted them to know how Brad had brutally murdered his girlfriend in a fit of teenage aggression before cutting his own throat out. It would be a poetic bit of melodrama, just like Romeo and Juliet. I'm pretty sure I snapped the knife off in her sternum after the 15th or 16th downward stab, but by then she had stopped screaming. The knife's in my hand now. I was smart enough to wear gloves, and I already had my escape route planned out. You see, I may have never touched her, but that certainly didn't stop me from killing her.
One last story, and then I think it's time to sign off again. Old games are great, especially if you grew up with them like I did, and it's always good to rediscover some of your favorites. Some of them, though, were a little darker than we seem to have remembered. So let's hear about one particular browser game that claims it can scare you.
I'm a big fan of old browser games. I used to play a lot of them when I was a kid, and while most of them were buggy or repetitive, they were still a great way to kill some time while you were at school or stuck at home. I have many fond memories of sitting at the computer with my friends, laughing and showing each other games we found on random websites. So when I heard that Java was being phased out, I got to thinking about all the old games I used to enjoy, and decided to track some of them down. I went to Reddit to see if anyone knew of any of the sites that used to host these old games, since many of them were now defunct. And a few of them suggested Newgrounds, a place I was familiar with, but a few others suggested a dozen other sites. These were smaller places which made up for their lack of showmanship with a vast selection of retro games. I'd started clicking on them, basking in the nostalgia for a while and losing myself in the simple pleasures of these simple games. I mean, I was stuck at home due to quarantine, so what else did I have to do? That's how I found I Can Scare You. I read the description and really liked what I saw. It made me wonder how I'd never found this game before. I used to love the small selection of adventure games you'd sometimes find on Java websites, little maze runners or exploration adventure games, and this one had a creepy twist that I really liked. I had expected it to be a lot of poorly animated jump scares, probably some loud screams accompanied by a picture of the girl from Poltergeist, but I figured I'd try it out anyway. What did I have to lose, right? When I loaded it up, I was greeted by something very familiar. For those unaware of the concept, screensavers were used a lot back in the day to keep your monitor from freezing in place. Windows had many iconic screensavers, but one of the most recognizable was the maze you saw sprawling out before you took on the point of view of the runner, shifting around and following a set path as you tried to find the exit. This game had dropped me into a very familiar maze, with brick walls and a sand floor, and an 8-bit soundtrack trying for creepy, but was mostly just sounding spooky. It was a little different than I remembered, though. The walls were black brick, like a negative copy of the maze, and covered in a bright green moss bordering on neon. The sand was also dark, and as I moved, it made that classic game crunch that meant you were walking over dirt. I could hear something like the wind in the background, and as I moved, I could see that the normal pictures on the wall had been replaced with grainy photos of people. The images were pixelated, but clearly actual photos. The strange thing was, they weren't anything like corpses or monsters or anything. They were just ordinary people. Some of them smiling, some of them looking off blankly, but all of them looking like candid shots of people from websites or the DMV or something. As I moved through the maze, I became aware of a voice that seemed to be following me. It was just a whisper at first, but the deeper I went into the maze, the louder it became. I would turn around and find the pictures were still on the wall, but whatever was making that noise was nowhere in sight. The images seemed to repeat themselves. Same 10 or 12 photos again and again, and I figured they must be the staff that had worked on the game or something. It was a little creepy having them watch me as I went through the maze, but no creepier than anything else I'd seen in a game. The voice, however, was definitely getting a little nerve-wracking. I could hear it now, and it was saying the same thing over and over again in a vaguely feminine computer voice.
I can scare you. I can kind of scare you.
I turned to the game, but there was nothing behind me. The voice had sounded close, and I assumed it was the enemy of the game. It kept moving away and getting closer, always just out of sight. So I just kept moving, kept looking for an exit, kept making my way through the maze. There was always an exit in the screensaver that made the maze fall apart and made a new maze begin. When I found what I was looking for, though, it turned out to be the last thing I'd expected. I came around a corner and heard the voice getting louder again.
I can scare you. I can kind of scare you.
I turned left and found a dead end.
I can scare you. I can kind of scare you.
I dashed back and took a right instead. Then I found another dead end.
I can scare you. I can kind of scare you.
I sighed and turned around to face my fate. I guess the game was over. That's when I saw what sort of beast lurked in this maze.
I can scare you. I can kind of scare you.
It was a grainy picture, just like the others, but this one moved and was far from the bland recreations the others had been. The image's eyes appeared to be leaking blood, the mouth crunching as it blared its ceaseless words. It barreled toward me lamely, filling the whole hallway, its face twisted in pixelated agony as it crashed closer and closer.
I can scare you. I can kind of scare you.
Despite its alarming form, it was clearly a picture of my dad's face. I backpedaled in fear, running and taking turns at random until I finally came to the dead end that I'd been looking for. It contained a single floating picture, and if this was the exit grid, I didn't know if I wanted to see what sort of maze it would generate next. The image was a crumpled body, a car accident or a hit and run, lying in the street in a squishy mass of broken flesh. It was grainy and pixelated like the others, but this one made me stop and gasp a little as I tried to make sense of it. The body's face was pointed to the sky, its mouth open and its eyes staring. As I looked at it, the blood seemed to pool around it, glistening wetly despite having no origin.
I can scare you. I can kind of scare you.
I jumped as I heard the phrase uttered right behind me, loud enough to make my speakers crackle. Suddenly my character fell over and my screen was covered in red as the screaming monster with my father's face crunched its jaws over me. I turned the screen off and pushed away from my computer, suddenly not wanting to see anymore. The last image had been the most familiar of all. It wasn't every day you got to look at your own face as you lay dying. The other pictures had been strangers, weird stock images, but the image of my father and I had been unique, and they were very jarring. The face of my father had been twisted in agony, and the eyes had been turned up in anger as the neon red blood oozed from them. My own face and body had been confused, devoid of hope, as I lay bleeding to death in a pool of my own blood. Even if the game had somehow pulled pictures from my computer, it couldn't have gotten either of those from me. No picture of my father existed that looked like that, and certainly no picture of me that looked like that existed. I closed the game and realized that at some point it had gotten dark. Looking at my watch, I realized I'd been playing the game for 3 hours. It was pushing midnight, and I shut my computer down and climbed in bed. I tossed and turned as I tried to push the image of that final horde out of my mind. As grainy and unreal as it had been, it was still a picture of me, and I was clearly dying. How did they have it? Where had they come from? Those images followed me into sleep, and they haunted my dreams all night. I found that I was running from that hellish thing in my nightmares, and it stretched and chomped right behind me. It didn't beat around the bush this time, and it dogged my heels for hours as I ran through that 8-bit hell. Right at the end, I came to a dead end and saw my own body lying on the floor, surrounded by blood. I rolled my head lamely to look at myself, moaning at a mouthful of blood as the huge dad head fell on me and turned my world red. When my cell phone woke me up at 7:15, it was almost a blessing. I reached for it groggily, seeing my mom's number and answering it shakingly. Hello? Honey? Baby, I need you to listen to me for a minute. There's been an accident. Your dad's dead, sweetheart. She sobbed a little before continuing. I sat up quickly, still thinking I was dreaming. What? Turn on the news, honey. It's been all over the news since it happened. I need you to come home right away. I need someone here with me. I told her I would, and she hung up, and as I walked into the living room, switched on the TV, wondering what I would find on the screen. It had been a bus accident that had happened about an hour and a half ago. Dad, the other passengers, and the driver had been killed when another bus had T-boned them at an intersection. The bus Dad had been on had been crushed against the storefront, and the engine had ignited. The ensuing fire had made rescue very difficult. After extinguishing it, emergency services had really only been rescuing bodies. Then they started flashing the pictures of the deceased across the screen, and I felt the remote slip from my hands and clatter on the hardwood. I recognized all of them. They were the faces in the maze. I flopped bonelessly onto the couch, my legs refusing to hold me. I'm curled on the couch now, filled with a deep sense of dread over the knowledge I seemed to possess. Everyone I'd seen in that maze last night was dead now. Everyone except me. I had seen my own contorted face as I lay broken on the floor of that 8-bit maze. If everyone I had seen in there was supposed to die today, why had I seen my picture? I hadn't died. I was still clearly alive. For now. People keep calling me, but all I can do is hunker on the couch and wait. waiting for my own fate to come and sweep me off the board as well. So if you stumble across this game in your internet travels, do yourself a favor and don't play it. I wish to God I never had.
I think that's about enough stories for today. But don't fret. I'm sure there'll be more great tales tomorrow, and I hope you'll join us for them. Till then, this is Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful day and a spooky evening.